So, by demand, and I don't know if it's by greed, I was asked for a review of Casting Shadows. And I actually have to say that I like the game. Now with that, we'll go over what it is and isn't. But this is going to be an early review of the game, and not, well, it probably will be full, comprehensive. But as you can see, this sleeve is really hard to get off. And I think I have to undo it. I got everything to fit in the box. Casting Shadows. Now, I know I made the joke that it's a Pokemon knockoff, and I was actually curious of why this video is so popular. And there's really not a amount that I see about the game. First impressions for the game so far, for gameplay, is I like the game. It is a battle arena game. I knew it was some type of battle arena game. And it does have some flaws with battle arena games. But those flaws are the typical flaws of a battle arena game. So I'm not really weighing that against how Casting Shadows is. Now, I hate rating games mainly because a lot of it is subjective. I bought Casting Shadows based off of cute animals to go play with, my nephews and have something to do with them because I actually don't know what else to do with them. I'm really bad with kids. So I figured a cute cartoony game because I'm a terrible adult and I like cartoons still. So the art is what drew me into the game. First the cute Pokemon nostalgia, and then the art. And I knew it was a battle arena game. I didn't expect it to be, ripping heads off or limbs or dismemberment. But the art really got me into the game. I actually knew nothing about the company. I didn't even know it was Untitled Unicorns that was back in the game. The components are really, really good for what you get out of the base box. And I'm going to say that because the caveat with retail. I don't know what the retail edition is going to look like. I don't know really what's different. I just know that it's missing a few things and it's missing Kickstarter exclusives. That being said, I don't think the Kickstarter exclusives are that important. Now, I did check out Unstable Unicorn's webpage, and they said that this was supposedly going to release for sale around April of this year. I know there's less tiles, but I don't know if that's going to make that much of a difference. And I only did a 4-player variant of this game. Casting Shadows is, again, it's an arena combat game. But it's done in a way I really like. Now, I've heard someone mention that it's very similar to Black Rose War, and I was just like, Black Rose War is really an expensive game. And it has a lot of stuff that goes along with it. So that being said, I've never played Black Rose War. In fact, this type of game I usually don't get into. I don't like arena games, and this goes back to one of the flaws of arena-type games, especially if you're playing with multiple people. There's always one winner, and if you get knocked out early, it gets boring real quick, just waiting there for the round to end. And other issues are, of course, you always have the weird unbalanced gang-up mechanic and kingmakers in arena-type games. So that's really the gripe, and if you have an arena game that kind of does that already, you're not really missing much. But for how much Casting Shadows costs, and again, I don't know the retail edition, but the Kickstarter edition, as long as you didn't go crazy and buy the all-in and the vinyls and the figures and all that, it was fairly reasonable price. This is probably one of the cheapest Kickstarters I ever backed, and I was also like, yeah, I'll throw $50 at it, I don't care. I think I'm going to get something I really like about it. Now, this dice tower? Not a fan of it, but I'm not a fan of dice towers in general because I have this giant 4x8 table I use for all my gaming. So I'm not too worried about, ooh, the dice tower is an exclusive. I don't know what the retail dice are going to look like, but I find these dice are really good. And this is actually kind of one of the points I like about this game. The dice are very well thought out. I did not realize until I actually read up and played the game a few times that so you have basically only four resources. You have this black crystal that's always bad and it causes you damage. And you have to waste an action to get rid of it. It cannot be rerolled. There are a few things I think that will allow you to manipulate them. I know the shadow pets are really cool. But this purple is red and blue. And the purple color is a wild. And that's just really clever. I didn't think about it until I was like, oh wow, purple is red and blue, and it's a wild. You have these shadow fragments that you use to upgrade your character, and this is a neat concept. It's also a currency used to buy certain really powerful cards. But, and the concept is, you can only use these abilities when you get 5 dark crystals. And honestly, in our gameplay, we, I was the only one that actually pulled off using the ability, and it wasn't game breaking. But my friend was like so angry because you get this on phase 3, but you can't use this ability to phase 2. So he missed a whole round of combat. And my other friend was like, oh, I'm going to kill him before he can do that. So that kind of bummed him out. So I kind of feel like the flipping over Shadow Side's kind of a trap. But with that caveat, it gives you something more powerful than these abilities. I mean, they're strong abilities, but you have a turn to be stopped. And what it gives you is the Shadow Companions, and this is what I really think the reason for flipping your character over is. Now, I know the Kickstarter exclusive came with 3 more special companions. I don't really remember which ones they are or care, because all the companions are actually good. There is no bad companion. And there's a cool risk-reward system, since you always start with 3 companions on top. But the first person to take their shadow form must take a companion. And because they're all unique, you might actually take a companion that's more important for your strategy. But they all have very, very good abilities. They're all kind of situational too, and that's the part that's really interesting, because it affects how you play. The game seems really simple. I was like, oh, it's a kid's game. Another thing that was really neat is the counterspells. So unlike most games where stuff is kind of like randomly placed about, these are in a fixed location, and to get them, what you get is random, but all their abilities are pretty good, and fairly balanced. There is one that's really broken, but I think there's only 1 copy of it. Yeah, the Safety Dome. Prevents all damage. I think it's the only one, yet there's only 1 copy of it, that prevents all damage. Really powerful card, but again, in a deck this thick, your odds of getting it, not that great. Unless you're just sitting there and milling and you know how to count cards. The spells. I actually really like the spells. So you have the costs. This is an orb and a blue crystal. The range. Everything you need to know about the spell is actually written on the card. And I love that, because you don't have to reference anything. And then we have spell levels. Now certain spells, like, let's get to this, like Sudden Doom. This is a level 3 spell. You have to discard a level 2 spell, pay a dark crystal, and a blue orb to actually get the card. And then to use it, like I said, it says it right there, and it shows you the hex space and everything. Very simple concept. These equipment cards, really good, because this is really the only way you can carry items over, and I love that this is a resource that will sit out on the table and be fairly balanced, and you have to decide what you're going after. Same with the spells. These conversion cards, they're economy cards basically that help you manipulate your dice rolls, resources you get from your dice rolls, and it's, again, really, really helpful. I feel like this is a very well thought out game, and I really put it at the level of a dumb kid's game, and I wasn't really thinking about it at the time, and that's kind of what I expected. Now that being said, I had a low expectation for the game, and I didn't think much of it. I just thought it was a really cute game. And that's where I made the mistake. Now, because this isn't the type of game I normally play, I wasn't really in the market of like, oh yeah, it's a rip-off of another game. And I think that's where, you know, a lot of people get, oh, this is a little kid's game and it's not great. I actually found this very in-depth, and I guess I'm just not that big gamer I thought it was. But I usually play longer, more complex games, and playing this game was very refreshing. And I say it's refreshing because the game is quick. Now, the times are subjective and it plays, but you can make this game really cutthroat or really simple. But in your base setup, you're always going to have the desert tile, I forgot what it's called, but it's this pool tile, and the lava lands. And it's really cool with the lava lands. If you are driving towards changing your form, it's always going to give you a shadow crystal. So you can use it for economy, or you can use it to actually charge up your character by collecting the shadow crystals until you get your 3, and then you can flip over to your ultimate form. And I say that's important because you might not get the dice roll, because anyone who knows me is I am cursed with dice. I statistically roll the worst things possible. I don't know how I do it. It just happens. It's odd. The counter spells are always from the desert, so if you are looking for some defense, you can run to the desert. Health. Health is a difficult thing in games, and I like the fact that in the arena, in the middle, if you start your turn here, you will gain 2 health. These are 3 things that automatically balance the game. Now, the things that get weird is how the arena is set up, because every character has a starting tile, and that tile controls how the outcome of the battle is going to go. So depending on player order, it's going to be first, second, third, something like that. It's not important. But there is a placement, and this is where that combat sense of tactics comes in, and if you're into that type of like plotting and thinking, it's really cool. The thing that I think is annoying is that you have to have this reference sheet and double check it like 50 times. Don't like that. I wish they put... So on this reference sheet, they have these little symbols right here. They could have put that small print somewhere on there so you wouldn't always have to pass around the reference sheet since you only have one reference sheet. Didn't like that. But cool things about it was, like, you know, my buddy started with the Frill Lily pad, and if you start on his or her tile, its tile, it's going to give you a blue orb. So it gives you a really good lead, but Frill Lily pad's kind of weak, and the shadow ability is to buff up. I used Ninetales here, and Ninetales, you can't be attacked if you're the only character on this tile, which is really strong in my opinion. I was like, oh wow. Now in the 4-player game, it's really small, in a 6-player game, it adds another row, so there's a little bit more spacing, and depending on the spells. And that was one thing we were constantly checking with each other was spells. It was just like, what is the range of the spells? What can he do? And I hope he doesn't roll crystals. So when you run around the board on setup, you're going to throw out spells. You kind of know where they are. And you kind of have a plan to build on who's going to go do what. Now, Casting Shadow says that the youngest player goes first, and usually the youngest player isn't going to like read and metagame everything. But most adults are, and I don't know if that's part of skill scaling. But I thought that was a neat thing about the game. You go around, you collect your spells, you roll your dice, you hope your dice give you the resource, you re-roll until you either bust or, you know, get nothing but bad dice. But then you have to use actions to pick up. Using equipment items, though, is not an action. So you can have these and save them in your goodie bag, and it's a resource that people will probably keep an eye on and be like, why is he saving that? Is he going to use it for something good? We don't know. Another thing that was really neat is you don't get to keep the resources. So if you don't spend it, you lose it. And that's the reason why there's not a lot of tokens in this game. Because really, they're just used for the person's turn activating. Now, you can have that over-analytic paralysis where you're like trying to figure everything out, and those kinds of people ruin games like this. This is actually a really quick combat game, and I found it really intuitive, really simple. The rulebook is easy, it's a fairly straightforward game. These reference cards are really helpful because they tell you all your actions, literally. The thing that sucks is they're both the same. I wish they added something on the back. It would have been nice, though, if they put some of the token effects on here, but whatever. And, I mean, that's only stun and free frost tokens. But travel, move 1 space. That's 1 action out of your 4. Collect. If you have the resource dice or the resource cards you can use, and tokens to spend, you can buy the spell. Like these Fatal Fronds, aka Leaf Cutter. Now, notice it's gray. It doesn't care if you use a purple, blue, or red. As long as you just spend 2 orbs, you'll have this attack. And it'll stay for you forever unless you want to discard it, because you can only have 5 spells. Plus, you know, including equipment cards. And then these economy cards, these blue cards, they are spells. You can refresh. So, for some reason, if you're stuck on a tile, let's say you're frozen, and you can't roll to buy whatever the spell was, you can toss the spell card. And this comes with the planning phase, because sometimes there will be a really powerful spell that someone really wants and they're going to go after, and you can just get rid of it. Now, that being said, there are multiple copies of most spells in the deck, so take that as a gamble. Reroll. So you can reroll your dice and hope you get the resources you need, unless you roll a black die, which is a corruption crystal, I believe. And to get rid of this, it takes an action, which is going to be Protect. You gotta remove a Cursed Crystal. If you're stuck with it at the end of the turn, you take a damage. And then cast, pay the requirement that is listed at the bottom of your spell to do its effect. And that's an action. And that's pretty much the whole game. You just run around and Battle Royale, skipping and hopping and trying to get resources. The planning and strategy is really getting rid of cards, using your environment to your advantage, and those are really cool, especially for a low-tier skill game like this. And I'm not knocking that. I actually really like that about this game for reasons that I'll get to. I think this is a very, very good game for introducing people into the board game. Especially people that are kind of like, they want to get into it, but they don't really understand why people get into board gaming. This has some very friendly character art. I mean, this is kid-friendly art. I mean, it could be scary if you've got kids that are afraid of dragons, but it's also a good way to bring in people that it's not intimidating. Slowly, once they understand how the dice rolls, the manipulations, discarding things they want to, using your environment for your advantage, it builds that skill set, and it starts getting those gears turning in people's heads of like, how do I play and get better? I mean, after our first game of Casting Shadows, I was like, and I was like, well, we're doing a review anyway, so I'm going to force you guys to play this until you get tired of it and go home. So, yeah. Sorry, guys. And then I told them I was going to do this video because I have to put this out next week. But it's a really cool game that gets you thinking about, it's not just let's go over here and smash each other like Super Smash Bros. Button mashing. And that's what I like about the game. Cons of the game, it's a low skill set, but I like the fact that it's a low skill set. So I'm not saying it's a con, but if you're one of those big guys that like to metagame and play Twilight Imperium and just be like, I'm always going to beat you and win because I'm the biggest, baddest, and best, you're not going to have a good time because people don't like that in general. As far as replayability goes, there's only 8 characters, so there's 8 different tiles for them to be on. The arena setup's going to matter. This deck of cards, we played I don't remember how many games, but a lot. But we probably shuffled really bad, or it was just all over the place. It was very random. The counterspells, really cool, just going through, but we weren't really doing that. We were running around and pretty much like, let's grab what we can and hurt each other. So, yes, we were playing Super Smash Brothers. But a lot of the times, I had to think about, like, what monster or what companion that was really going to help me a lot. And my buddy was like, the Swamp Monster's really good. And he was like, there's probably another one. So he wasn't worried about grabbing them first until I was like, I'm pretty sure there's only one of each. But him grabbing the Swamp Monster, which I really wanted because I am terrible and I was rolling lots of black dice, I was like, this saves you one action. Get rid of all the black dice and don't get hurt. But because he was the first to swap over, he got the Swamp Monster. The next card that came up was the Occult Octo. And this guy actually won me the game because I kept on rolling black Curse Crystals. And allowing me to discard one as an action to do a damage is how I won. And this goes to like action economy or action efficiency. There's a lot of mechanics in this game. Some might be like overbearing for people that don't see it right at the beginning. And if you're a jerk and you just throw someone in the fray and don't help them understand how the mechanics work, the game's not the problem. It's kind of you. Now, that being said, now here's some legitimate gripes. Resources. They are random. And anyone who hates RNG gods as much as I do knows that you can always just roll bad. The large deck of spells. It is random what you're going to get there. Just as much as the counter spells. That is random. So there is RNG in the game, and it does affect gameplay. And if that's something that turns you off, this might turn you off. Now that being said, I don't think that you shouldn't try the game. I really like the game. Granted, I like lots of games. But this normally isn't the type of game I play because I don't like battle royales because I don't like being the guy that gets knocked out or ganged up and then I have to sit on the side and wait for everyone to be like, oh yeah, whatever, I'm going to go play on my phone. That's the con of battle royales in general or any competitive game, especially with a large group of players. Playing this on 6-player mode, I don't know if it'll go faster and I don't know if it'll be boring because everyone's going to talk and do whatever the thing is. If you have people that are dedicated to playing the game and actually paying attention, the game goes quick. Other times you'll have the guy that overanalyzes, and sometimes that's me, and sometimes that's my friends, because we do get competitive, and that's one of the reasons I don't really like competitive games, because it kind of brings out the worst characters in us and also drags the game on, because when you're losing, you're losing. And Casting Shadows also suffers from that mechanic. If you're really that far low down and you're getting beat up, you are losing. And it's just not fun. You're just playing Kingmaker at that time, or you do what I do and just cause random chaos because you find it entertaining at that point, which also rubs people the wrong way, but that's how I find my entertainment when I got nothing else to do, especially when you have a dead action. And like I said, there are turns where you're just going to be like, oh, I rolled 4 curse dice and I don't want to take any damage and I can't re-roll anyway, so I'll either run around or I'll figure out something else to do. So there's an RNG issue. It's not super bad, but it's discouraging. The fact that player order does matter, and the first player, if they're paying attention and they know what they're doing, they're going to get rid of and try to slow down your opponents, and that's part of the strategy. I get it, but it kind of sucks too at times. Sometimes they won't see what you're doing, and it works out great. Or other times, what they think they screwed you over with, they just helped you with. So again, RNG stuff. Not too bad, to be expected, and I'm not disappointed by the game. The components are great. I really like the components. And again, I did not back any of the Kickstarter vinyl or the acrylic stuff because I just don't think they would have fit on the board anyways. As you can see, these hexes, they're about 5 inches. And you can have everyone there. If you have the big vinyl figures, I know you're not going to play with the vinyl figures, they're just cute. But the acrylic stands, I think, were a little bit bigger. There just wasn't the space. I think the wooden meeples do a fine job. There are some weird coloring discrepancies, and I say that as like a weird thing to complain about. So we have this owl and the eagle. The owl involves in the eagle. I think the owl looks purple and the eagle is brown. And we have another example of that with the dragon thing and the whatever the axtol or whatever it's called. I can't pronounce it right for some reason. Now this broke because I was pushing it out of the sleeve constantly because I didn't want to break the sleeve. I'm not too annoyed by that. I can fix that with tape. I wish it didn't break. Storage of it being standing up, the components do slide around a lot and they come out. If you're going to put the dice tower in, they should have found a better way to put the dice tower in the main box. But again, minor complaint. Gameplay wise, I think it's really good. Components, they're good for the most part, and I say that like, yes, they're very good for what they are. It's just small, nitpicky stuff. I love these dice, and like I said, the red and purple thing, red, blue, and purple, genius. I think that's a smart move. Another thing they added was, they added these little pips for color blindness, but I'm not exactly sure how that helps. I'm like kind of colorblind, but not, I don't know. As far as purple, I guess there is no color blindness affecting purple, or just because it has no dots. Same with the crystals. And you only have one purple die too, so that's a big gamble of manipulation. You have 2 red and 2 blue dice that are majority for what you're going to get, and then 1 random chaos purple. But all in all, I found the game easy to work around, get what you need, and do what you got to do. And my friends found it pretty enjoyable. Now, should you buy the game? Well, that depends. Everything I've talked about so far, how do you feel about it? Second, I don't know how much the retail edition is going to cost. And for the people scalping this on as a Kickstarter exclusive and trying to make like triple their money, I wouldn't pay it until I saw what retail was. Like, it's a fun kids game. This is not a die-hard competitive battle royale, I'm going to win tournaments type game. I mean, they could go that route. I just don't think they will. I don't know much about Unstable Games. I don't know how they do, like, if they're like Renegade or, let's say, Dice Throne, where they will put exclusives out, but they'll charge more for them later down the road. So that being said, I would not buy this from a scalper. If you could find this close to the Kickstarter pledge, or you're willing to wait for it to come out on retail, I highly recommend you do that. Save your money, because it's a good game, but it is not, I gotta have it now and pay like 8 times the price versus retail type game. And a lot of that goes into the FOMO mentality that people put out, because let's face it, it's business. At the end of the day, they got to get your money somehow, so they're going to figure out how to do it. And that's why I didn't buy any of the vinyl stuff, figures, or the acrylic standees. None of that made any sense to me, anyways. I just have way too many games taking too much space. So, as far as scoring, I put this really at a B. I kind of want to give it a B plus, just because I really like the art. But in reality, I have to give it myself a B. Objectively, it's a good game. I like it. It's fun. It fits the short tempo, and it's a good break for me playing longer games, especially when you just get done with a campaign of, let's say, I don't know, Arkham. When you run a scenario Arkham, especially with 4 players, that can be anywhere between 2 and 4 hours. And at that point, that's a lot spent on one game. Then you can pull this out. And if you guys are actually dedicated to playing it, you can play probably 2 to 3 rounds in an hour. It's not that deep or complex. And like I said, it kind of reminds me of Super Smash Bros. Granted, spamming moves all day, but your end goal is to get better spells. But certain spells like Fatal Fronds or aka Leaf Cutter, it just does 2 damage. You don't have to pay anything. And that's a great spell to just run and hold on, man. Just be annoying. Or you can play the meta game and wait for these shadow creatures. Because again, the shadow side, like I said, it's a powerful ability, but you really don't get to save up the 5 crystals and then trigger it. And once you trigger it, you go back to 0, and then you have to save up again. Unless you're really going, or you just constantly get those rolls. But none of the shadow abilities we saw were game-breaking. And that's where, the game is kind of like, These companions are just really good for option. They give you so many extra choices. And again, they're not all situational. They all do something that's helpful. You just have to figure out how to exploit it. And some of them fit your playstyle better than others. So overall, Casting Shadows, definitely, I would say, go out and get it. Especially if you don't have an arena combat game like this. If you have children, I would definitely get this for them, because I think it's a fun game. If you're one of those people that just needs a game to slowly introduce people into the bigger board game, like, let's say, the Catan players, this might be a good way to get them in. But that's pretty much my review of Casting Shadows. I highly recommend that you play the game if you're still on the fence. Don't take my word for it, because, I'm not the end-all say-all to anything. But if you like what I do, please subscribe. Leave me comments, likes, dislikes. Tell me what you want me to see me do in the future, since I am working on a lot of stuff right now. Other than that, take care, guys, and GG.